Now let's start off with Martyrs Roundtable and National Dialogue. The National Dialogue Committee is actually ongoing right now, and they are having a roundtable with the Ministry of Treasury, the State Department of Housing, and the Ministry of Energy. Let's cross over all the way in Bomas and listen in.
Just on that, the need for oversight by Parliament is an issue of concern, even as you privatize. So please, just take that into account.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I think Parliament will always oversight virtually everything. But I just wanted to, because I think the rules of the game will still have to be made by Parliament at the end of the day. But I wanted to say the new mode of privatization allows some diversity in terms of what you're dealing with. We are not saying that the Parliament will not be involved. Parliament will be involved. I've listened to some even frontier works in this area in some countries, like Indonesia, for example. And you can actually bring together all the SOEs in one kick-up, and you can rank them. These are the high-performing, these are the medium, and below here are the laggards. And you actually transfer their management, not ownership. And you can now then pick up as they become profitable. You can cherry pick in terms of what you want to privatize. And because there are diverse ways of privatizing, this is the route that will go. For us, you can imagine the kind of transfers we make to SOEs. You can imagine the savings. So essentially, this is the journey that we're taking now that the law is in place. Tax regime, I think, again, the next question was tax regime and whether it will be used in the next finance bill. That is what we are working hard to, because we want to make sure that we are well grounded, both in terms of theory and practice, and we make sure that we come up with a tax system that is going to give us that is going to be with us for a long time. What are we looking for? We are looking for a tax system that is sustainable. We are looking for a tax system that is predictable. We are looking for that tax system that is going to give us value for money. Let me give you, for example, one point about the flavor of the current tax system, for example. One of the analyses they have done on VAT, for example, is that 18% of the total VAT goes to refund, VAT refunds. Okay, 18%. Out of that 18% that goes to the VAT refunds, it only 95% goes only to two products: bread and milk. You can imagine the next question I asked some of my researchers: who buys milk from the supermarket and bread? Can we have a chat? Anyway, I don't want to go beyond there, Your Excellency. I think you can see what are we trying to do. If 18% of the VAT goes to refund, 95% of that refund is taken up by two products. Then we have to ask, let's find out those who are taking those products. And anyway, that's another level. But I just wanted to, that's a flavor of why we really need to reform. The third question I was asked was about when we talk about corruption, and I tried to decompose this in terms of greasing efficiency and also state capture, or what we call illegal extraction of economic rent, because I wouldn't say corruption. But the most important thing here is that we want to ask ourselves, there is an institutional failure problem, but we have to fix it. Let me give you an example. Some years back, I don't want to tell you when, but you remember when. There was a declaration that any uniformed police officer can stop a vehicle on the road, isn't it? You remember that? What was the reaction by the market? Standardize the bribe to 5 to 50 shillings. So there is no question asked. The matatu stops, it just gives 50 bob and continues. That is pushing in institutional failure problem to the next level. I observed this on the road myself. I'm sure you also observed. So you can see we need to step back and come back and say, let's force our institutions let's push our institutions to operate the way they are supposed to operate. I was asked the question about the disequilibrium in the macro space, which also contributed to the nominal exchange rate movements. But also, I think my friend Udai had asked also why Tanzania and Uganda is not the same. They did not interfere with their market. You know, the bottom line is this. When you affect the non-tradable prices, even now, even like this morning, I was still looking at our structure of non-tradable prices. They are still pushing. They are still not yet finished the adjustment process. They are still pushing for the exchange rate depreciation because they are showing there is a disequilibrium. It's a good example of, we used to talk about many years back, the resource problem, the natural resource problem. You know, there are some years that the government was the only investor and it was investing in non-tradable sector. If you make yourself the only game in town, you'll be the only game in town, but that game will not last long. That is what is happening. That is why the nominal exchange rate has to now adjust because it was held constant. Every time I turn, this is my, I think there is somebody who mentioned, my friend, you mentioned that this is 10 months, but I think mine is like 11 months since I took this job. You can imagine the speed at which I have been trying to cover to run some of these things. Where did we fail? Where did the policy failures start? And how can we fix it? Now, Your Excellency, now I come to your questions. One of the things I need to let you know, while I was away after the policy tour, you know, after the central bank, I came back to realize that the tax to GDP, we call it tax effort, was 22% in Kenya. And somebody also made the message clear that Kenya was doing better than all the countries combined. 22% of tax to GDP was the revenue. That was when Kenya government was financing its total expenditure, both recurrent and development, to the tune of between 96% and 98%. I was one of those people who pushed the East African community, especially the governors, to argue that our convergence criteria is 25%. Go ahead and do so much work. And I was looking at it that we are only 3% to go, isn't it, to get to 25. I have come back for another tour of policy duty to realize that we had gone down to 13.7%. You cannot do, it cannot happen unless there is a major structural change. Right now we are struggling, we are at 15.8%. That's why you see the fiscal gap. The whole issue is that if we move to 9% of fiscal gap, we started accumulating so much debt, so that we have to clear that for us even to think, because it has to be financed. Now, just imagine the IMF, we have agreed we are moving towards 19%. Just imagine the other countries were moving on. So in a sense, we have to pay for these policy mistakes, and I think this is something that we feel has really been a problem. That is why, when we are having a fiscal gap of around 5.2% now, even though we had targeted 4%. This 145 billion, it is ranging between 0.9% and 1.2%, was actually being pushed by purely interest rates, expenditure, and because of the depreciation. So it means we have very little flexibility. It means that because, by the way, by having 22% of GDP coming from tax revenue and financing 96 to 98% of government total budget, both recurrent and development, it means that the government, the government sector was also building up. So it's going to be difficult to say, now let's cut it back today. It has to be financed through recurrent expenditure. Perhaps sometimes we pause the development, the spending. And that's why let me clarify that affordable housing tax is a tax, but it is being used as an intervention in a targeted sector, affordable housing. So that's why I'm calling it also at the very end an investment. Now, there are two things that I'm perplexed about. Expanding cities cannot work if we don't have affordable housing. And let's not assume that expanding cities can only be in Nairobi and the major cities. We can also create other smaller cities, satellite cities, but they will be given a boost by this kind of targeted intervention and targeted investment in that sector, because it has a large impact in the economy. It can pull the economy with it, and that is why we are so passionate about it. Mheshimiwa Omar, I do believe that the G2G is an interesting case. The G2G was a success. I had to spend a lot of time sitting the ministers for, like, especially Tanzania and Uganda, how it is working. By the way, let me give credit to our market. Our market is very efficient at the import and retail level. The only thing that was hitting them was the dollar availability. And we found them with swaps in banks. They were crying. They could lengthen the swaps. The biggest problem was how the swaps were working. Okay? They will give you in shillings, but the dollar is depreciating, then everything becomes a problem when they are repaying it. It was a problem. Let me say, it was also a problem even when I was a governor. But that time the quantities were small and the market was trading in high figures. But you could see the repos. Sometimes you see the repos, they push the shilling by 2 shillings, then you ask what is the problem, they tell you we are looking for dollars, then they say, okay, continue looking for it, the market will correct itself. But that's when there is abundance. You know, the intervention that we do, by the way, somebody also asked why we should intervene. The intervention you do in a floating exchange rate is the one that you actually watch and decide that, okay, if the dollars are the ones that are scarce, I'll push some dollars in the market and withdraw the shillings. Okay? It is an operation. So in a floating exchange rate, even the reserves become part of an indirect instrument of monetary policy. That's how it should happen. If the dollar is becoming the dollar is depreciating because there's so much dollars in the market, you suck the dollars and you push the shillings out. Those are the interventions that markets believe. And because it's a competitive behavior, you're not allocating shillings or dollars. You are actually posting it in the Reuters and let everyone quote. It disciplines the market. Don't forget that in markets where repeat purchases is a good game, it works to discipline the market. And that's why the G2G is good. But you see, then we come back to our market. We are only lifting the oil and coming to the supply, and then the market takes off. Okay? So we are just helping that, and us is the framework agreement. They decide what. Banks are opening their LCs. So many banks are now opening their LCs, so we are happy about that. Yeah, okay.
All right, quite interesting take right there by the Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury, Treasury and National Planning, Professor Njuguna and he's touched on a myriad of issues, including the effectiveness of government to government